And so I have a second novel out, and it's a bizarre thing to have a second one come out, because friends and family, the general response is, "Oh my God, The Highest Tide wasn't a fluke. You know, you really can't do this." And then the reviewers out there, they all are starting to now look at my body of work. He's got a body of work, and they'll ask me questions along the lines of, why is it you have so much nature in your books, and why do you have these hyper observant characters that are so tuned into nature? And my answer is basically that Western Washington is so exotic when it comes to the landscape and the nature that it's hard for me to think about writing about this region and leaving the nature out. And I also just like having characters that see what most of us miss. Even those of us that care about the environment, kids or adults that tune into nature in ways that most of us don't. And so what I ended up doing with this book, Border Songs, is I set a novel up on the U.S.-Canadian border, and I set it in the post 9/11 era. So I'm setting it in the time when all of a sudden the Border Patrol tripled up there, and it's right between Mount Baker and the San Juan Islands in that 30-mile strip right there. And so I rode around with the Border Patrol, and I basically saw that they were not catching terrorists as they were hoping, but catching incredible amounts of marijuana that was being smuggled down from the north. And I also noticed as I'm riding back and forth that there's an amazing amount of birds up in that region, and that it's a migratory pit stop for all kinds of birds. And so when I saw these Border Patrol agents with all this time on their hands, I thought that perhaps I could turn one of them into a birder. And so, of course, I tried to turn him into the best birder ever. And he's a 6'8", highly dyslexic, 23-year-old who's been obsessed with birds since he was a kid. And he counts them every day, whether he wants to or not, on the different species he sees. Horned, all the while scanning branches for football-sized shaped bodies. After giving up on owls, he sped into the brightening valley toward the Mount Baker Highway to see what he could find before hitting snow. The highway followed the foamy nooksack up through cathedrals of cedars and birch and young hemlock as graceful as ballerinas. He watched treetops for incoming flocks and took side roads and quick strolls, drawing out a red-breasted sapsucker, a McGilvery's warbler, and 3 different sparrows. He spotted an American dipper popping its signature knee bends on rounded river rocks, then sped higher past fake Bavarian lodges and steep green hillsides with firs angling skyward like arrows. When the road snowed out, he parked and strode swiftly until he broke into a bright thawing meadow and stood there to listen. He heard the mock battle cry of a pileated woodpecker, then the chime-like mountain bluebird, and a Townsend solitaire, compensating for its drab appearance with its catchy mating riff. "Doesn't my song sound great to you? Doesn't my song sound great to you?" Then a ruffed grouse in the bush somewhere, drumming louder and louder until a red-tailed hawk glided through, low and fast and effortless, shutting everyone up with an irritable scream that sounded like an incoming piccolo Pete. Before leaving, Brandon heard the one-note song of the varied thrush, its long note setting off a series of other peeps, trills, and warbles, just as one clear flute tunes a concert band. He followed the nooksack out of the hills and felt the blush of exposure that came with rolling out of Baker's cool canopy into the low, blinding valley. The stench and heat intensified. Time slowed. There was little shade and few hiding places. Everyone saw what you were up to, and the smarter ones could tell how well you were doing it. Brandon roared out of the valley along back roads toward Tennant Lake, where he spotted widgeons, coots, mallards, and canvasbacks before climbing out of the truck. He heard a marsh wren trill as soon as he stepped on the boardwalk, then a gadwall burp. He strolled past a bittern without blowing its cover, its eyes on the sky, its streaked vertical neck blending with the reeds. He saw common yellowthroats and heard 9 different songbirds. Heading back out, he lobbed rocks into the reeds until he was rewarded with the unmistakable whistle and croak of a Virginia rail. Brandon was 11 when his mother introduced him to the secret society of people who knew more about birds than he did. Most of them seemed like fussy librarians and doctors, but he looked forward to their Christmas bird counts more than Christmas itself, and they soon fought over him to boost their counts, especially after he won the 24-hour birding contest, despite grumblings about insufficient documentation on 5 of the 118 species he'd claimed to see. The problem was he never saw these people any other day of the year, and he never found anybody, much less anyone his age, who wanted to count birds every day. He pulled up at Semiahmoo Bay in time to see western and glaucous gulls, Canada geese, marbled godwits, and two western sandpipers feasting side by side like some Noah's Ark spoof along the banks of the creek winding down the flats. He coasted past all that onto the heavy timbered pier and heard the cooing of mourning doves before finding them in the rigging of fishing boats, and beyond them the common mirrors, pigeon guillemots, and even a few marbled merlets diving for breakfast in the melon green water. When he stepped onto the pier, a ball of dunlins flashed into view, following their leader in shifting direction in unison, their white bellies flashing like aspen leaves, while a low flock of 11 tundra swans soared overhead in subdued exile. Brandon sat down on the edge of the pier, overwhelmed. A black and white belted kingfisher rattled out from beneath him with Elvis hair and hovered 50 feet above the bay, started to fall, then aborted its dive to hover and wait. Brandon watched it hunt for 15 minutes before realizing the whitened expanse of water a mile out wasn't one of the bay's reflective tricks, but one of the largest flocks of snow geese he'd ever seen. They wintered a couple counties to the south and rarely assembled in large numbers this close to the border, but this congregation had apparently taken an early pit stop on its return flight to Siberia. He heard the wings and squawks before he saw the first eagle circling. Once the second eagle buzzed them, the birds began lifting, fear spreading like electricity from wing to beak to wing, until this impossibly loud white curtain blotted out half the sky. And the sound, a solo snow goose flying overhead, sounds lost and pathetic, but with thousands honking simultaneously, it is a wildly different noise, like the tribal roar you hear in stadiums, yet even greater than that, beyond animalistic, more like an enormous avalanche, or the howl of the earth itself, the high-pitched hum of the sphere, if you could actually hear it, hurtling through space at 66,000 miles an hour. Brandon tilted back and joined in, honking along with the flock, until it split into long, loose V's, and the bedlam faded to an industrial squeal, then to an ambient wail, as the skeins turned to threads before fading to blue. Okay, thank you for listening, guys.